Okay, so the kids are checking right now with the kid next to them on whether they got the same result for this loan. You can tell it's a loan because we want the future value to be 0. And we put in a $5,000 loan, 5% interest, and 5 times 12 would be 60 months for the loan. That's a 5-year loan. And then when they alpha solved right here, what did you get?
Negative 94.4.
Negative 94.4. Now on the packet, and let's do this. If this is going to be money, do you agree that that probably should be rounded a little different? Nobody's ever seen a price tag 94.4, all right? So we either have like one more decimal place, or we should round it off to 94. But I'm hoping that you just would put like a 0 there, unless there's a number there. Is there a number there?
Yeah.
Oh, what number's there? 94.4 what?
Well, it's rounded.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, you rounded it. What was it? 395 or something like that?
356.
356? Okay, good. So then, let's talk about the rounding. Would you agree that 356 could, if you rounded it to this spot, round to a 4, but then you wouldn't want to just say 0.4. You'd want to say 40, because it's like pennies. You've never seen a price tag that ends in 0.4. Like, here's the price for the candy bar, 1.4. That would be like, what? $1.40. Now, that would make sense. See what I'm saying? Okay, so one of the flaws in this project, and I'm not going to make you all do it over again, is we didn't say where to round. So I have to accept it if you rounded to the 10th place like you just did, or if you round to 2 decimal places. That's what I was expecting you to do. I was expecting you to round to here, and then this would be a 36, because that number would tell you to round up. But I didn't tell you where to round to. So as long as you rounded correctly, it'll be fine. Okay? All right. So if the payment's negative, then this will be positive. My point is, one of these two is going to end up negative on a loan. And what I said I wanted you to do is the payment should always come out negative. So my ideal world is you overruled the directions in the packet and you made that negative. But if you didn't, I'm not going to make you go back and fix it, because the directions say make this negative, which is a mistake. But again, like I said, if you have the negative in the wrong spot here, then I can't mark you wrong, because the directions say to do that. Just a typo in the directions. Really should be negative here. Okay, now there's a reminder how to do loan. Let's just change the loan a little bit. I'm going to tell you a story. You can go change the numbers. I want you to make sure you're really good at making these loans, all right? So this loan is going to be just like the part for college, where you're going to borrow some money to go to college, and you don't want to borrow too much, because it'll just like, cost you so much money if you just by accident end up taking these huge student loans. I got a pretty impressive story on that I'll tell you later. But for right now, would you please change this to be a 10-year loan? Just go into the right spot, change it to be 10 years. Now, you can't get too far behind or you're going to not be able to catch up. 10 years. All right? Now, would you please compare your number of months to the kid next to you? 10 years. All right, and you didn't just type 10 here, right? You typed 10 times 12, which is 120. Okay, next up is the interest rate. Real world, a 10-year loan is typically for a like a college project. I think we gave you a number for the college thing of 6.7%. Okay, so we're going to use something different. Let's say I say that the interest rate you got quoted from the college is 7.2%. Again, I get the struggle with, like, do I move the decimal? If it's 7.2%, you put in 7.2. Okay, next up, present value. That is the loan. You borrowing this in the present. Like, I'm going to college. I need, well, let's do, I think, a very realistic number. I think I looked up an average, and I think the average kid had borrowed like $35,000 to go to college. So let's use that. That's not in the first year. That's total. All 4 years, total loans they have at the end is $35,000. All right. Now you can figure out the payment. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to compare that. If you are behind, go look up at the board and see what numbers we just put in and figure out the payment on that college loan. This is just like the college loan section, Part D. So please flip your packet to Part D, comparing two student loans, and see if you did this kind of the same way I just did it. And if you're not done with that part, this would be the perfect time to do it. The amount that you have to do for the project is you're going to make $25,000 loan for University A and a $75,000 loan for University B. But we're doing a $35,000 loan. All right. What were the payments on that? Osana, what did you get for the payments right there?
Negative 409.
Four-
410.
You're going to round to 410?
Yeah.
Okay. Negative 410. Can anybody verify that yours would have rounded to 410? Okay, good. Now, I want to talk about the real world for a second. Don't even, just stop thinking about the packet. Just think for a second about you. You're probably, if you're like most kids here, going to go to some kind of college. In literally just a couple years from now, you'll be picking what college I want to go to. And if you're not sure, you'll probably like apply to like 4. And then you'll get into 3 out of the 4 and you'll pick from those. And then they'll send you this thing called the financial aid package. And then they'll say, well, here's how much it's really going to cost you. And some of that is money you got to pay right then, and a lot of it will be loans. Now, some of you will be so lucky that mom and dad invested in Bitcoin, and they're going to be able to like easily pay for your college, okay? And others of you are like, yeah, my mom and dad aren't giving me anything. And there's a total range out there. And the even harder is if my mom and dad actually borrow money from me, so they owe me money already, and they don't have any money to send me, help me with college. Okay, so there's a huge range, and you're somewhere on that spectrum of, you're gonna have some amount of college loans. And $35,000 is like average. And $410 a month, even though it kind of sucks, is probably doable. But let's just see how much it would be if you go to the fancy school. There's many kids. I remember one of them, because she actually brought it up in class, because she was a junior, and she was talking about this and saying, here's the choice I actually have to make. Okay? She had to make a choice between a college that would cost $100,000 more but was an Ivy League school. And she was like, man, maybe it'd be worth spending the extra $100,000 of student loans because it's an Ivy League. So I think most people would be like, well, go to the Ivy League, it's easy. But that's a lot of money. And let's see. Everybody, please change this to 100,000. No, 100,000 more. $135,000 loan. See, it's $100,000 more in this scenario. I'll tell you the two schools. Oh, crap. I'm not positive anymore, but I think it was Penn, which is one of the Ivy League schools. And I know it was the University of Minnesota. And the reason it was such a big difference is the U of M had offered a full ride, no tuition, free here if you want. And when they did the financial aid calculation for the Ivy League school, which I think was Penn, their family was going to have to come up with $100,000, which they didn't have, so it would all be debt. So it was a $100,000 difference. So let's see how much bigger these payments are. I'm sure by now you have alpha solved right here. If you haven't already, do it right now. Alpha solve for your new payment. All right. Nichols, would you tell me what you got?
I got negative 1,581.42.
Would you agree that that's about $1,100 more if I round? Per month. For 10 years. So I want you to get perspective on like what you're trading off there. If you do that and you go to that school that's $100,000 more and you have an extra $1,000 a month payment, that can cause things like this. You want to buy a nice car, you just graduated from Penn or whatever, and they say, sorry, we can't lend you the money. Why? Because you have this huge student loan payment. What they really will do is this. They'll take your income of like 60 grand. Let's say you're like, ooh, I went to an Ivy League school, so I have 160 grand income. That's the reason people do it sometimes, is they think they're going to make way more. Sometimes you don't make any more, but you think you're going to make way more. So you got this $160,000 income, and they will say the max you can borrow with that income is, let's say, $2,100 per month. I'm not saying that's exactly right for this, but there's a max, the most you can borrow. Okay? And guess what? You've used up. Well, actually, the payment was $1,500. You've already borrowed $1,581, and you're going to have that for the next 10 years. So you don't have much left. You can only borrow, what would that be, about $500 a month. So they'll only let you borrow $500 a month because your student loan payments are so big. And if you can only borrow $500 a month, now all of a sudden you have to buy a not as nice car, and then that's it. You can't borrow any money for anything else. You can't go on any vacations because you're spending all your money on the college loan payment. That difference for that $1,100 more, I just want to give you perspective. For the first 10 years of your life, or $1,000 a month, it only costs about $3,000 total to go to Hawaii for a week. For you personally, just one person, and I'm talking about going the cheap way, the way I go, which is get the cheap airfare and you'd stay in a cheap place because it's just so beautiful. You can get out and drive to the beaches and it's all beautiful after that. Stay in a cheap place. And it could be as cheap as like $3,000 total. That extra $1,000 a month, you could go on a trip to Hawaii 3 times a year. Or you could have the giant student loan payment, which you probably can't do both because you won't have the money to do it. So my point, that's a lot of money a month. The other thing is, you might want to buy a house in the first 10 years after you graduate. If you have gigantic student loan payments, you can't buy a house. Because they'll be like, sorry, you've used up all your loan. The most I can give you is blah. Because you have these gigantic student loan payments. There's somebody in my neighborhood, and their dad shared with me, yeah, my daughter's got $120,000 in debt, and then she got an English degree. Like, what does that get you? Like, you could be an English teacher now, and you, with $120,000 in debt, you're going to have payments like this. That's like way more than I paid for my house payment. And they're stuck with that for 10 years. It's like barely going to have enough to eat, and you'll have to live in the parents' basement. It's that bad if you have a gigantic student loan payment. So don't do that. I think I've made my point. In my opinion, if you have a choice, do not take the gigantic student loans. Take something that's doable for you. All right. So that's what part D is like. I totally get you're probably going to have some student loans. Most people do. But don't pay the gigantic money. One thing you could warn you about, though, is, see, a lot of people are like, well, I can't apply to private schools because they're going to have huge loans. Actually, private schools also have a lot of money. And if you're a really good student and you have like strong ACT scores or a strong GPA, my daughter, for instance, St. Thomas offered her so much money off. She would have still had to have loans, of course, to go there. But it was cheaper to go to St. Thomas than it was to go to the U of M. And most people would think, well, the U of M is huge and relatively cheap because you have big classes and there's, a lot of downsides to the U of M. St. Thomas is like a private campus. I've been there. It's got this gorgeous football stadium and a really nice place to eat. It's a really nice school. And for my daughter, this was cheaper. Like the loan payments would be cheaper to go to St. Thomas than to go to the U of M. So you don't just rule out the private schools automatically just because they start more expensive, because the financial aid package they give you sometimes is cheaper. The bottom line is look at how much loans you'll have to take. And don't let that number get big because it'll really hurt you later. All right. So that's mostly been about part D. Let's do a little bit of part E because they're completely different. Everybody turn to the part E in the packet. It'll say E, plan for the future. And then we're going to do a loan. No, we're going to do an investment because they're the opposite of a loan. Here's your N, I, PV, PMT, FV for a loan. And of course, we're going to keep these last two things at 12 and 12, so the payments per year and the compoundings per year. All right, I'm going to tell you a little story. You put the numbers in your calculator, okay? All right, go to the top, N. Get to the top in the calculator. Here's a story about saving. You're going to save for 400 months. That's actually doable. You could actually do that. You get a job, and you'll probably work for 400 months at some job. Okay, so you're going to save, you may have to skip one here. You're going to save $400 a month. Sam, so far, what do we have? What's the N?
I'm not.
Okay, get there now. Put a 400 here. I'm going to come back to you in a second. All right. I just said that the payment was going to be $400 a month. And you should make it negative. I did say, and I stick to this, your payments are always negative. They come out of your checking account. They should be negative. There was a mistake on the packet that kind of messed that up, but I won't let it hurt you. Now, the PV is the present value. If you're saving up all this money, do you presently have any money? No, that's a zero. And interest is like how much money you're going to make on your investments. I just looked literally while I was homesick. I took a minute, I was on the internet, and I looked at like how much on one of my investments that I have, how much I got over the last 5 years. And it would round to 7%. So let's use that. I was kind of depressed because I'm like, dang, it should have been higher than that. But I had a lot of it in bonds. There's stocks and there's bonds. And bonds haven't done well over the last 5 years. So dragged my investments down a little bit. I was hoping it'd be more like 9 or 10. All right. This is the only one I didn't tell you. Therefore, you can alpha solve there. Sam, tell me when you're ready.
I don't think I'm doing it right. I'm not getting information.
I will come and help you. Pause for a second. Okay, so future value. Time cross, what'd you get?
9.14.
9 point something? Can't be right for future value. 9? I don't know.
Wait,
I don't know what you typed in, but I'll come back to you on a different one. Yes?
I got $633,777.
777. Can anybody verify 633,777? Okay, awesome. Good. So, do you know what you typed wrong? I'm just
Yeah.
curious. What did you type wrong?
I actually I messed up the 400.
Instead of the payment?
Like for the end, yeah, I messed that up.
Oh, messed up this. Okay, gotcha. All right. Yeah, if you did 400 years, 400 times 12, then it'd be a gigantic number. It probably could have started with a decimal, and that could have actually explained that. Okay, so anyway, back to this. Now, that's a decent amount of money, but honestly, that's not nearly as much as you would have if you saved for 50 years. Would you please figure out what to change about this to do 50 years? Hint, it goes under N. Hopefully you figured out I meant to type 50 times 12 right there. What is 50 times 12?
600.
So that's a lot bigger than 400 that we had before, right? This does not automatically change, but if you go alpha solve, then it will. Remember, we had about 600,000, and now, Osana, what'd you get now?
2,179,200.
Holy cow. You read it perfectly, but I wasn't ready. Sorry. 2 comma what?
179,
Comma what?
228.
228. Good enough. Nice. The difference? About $500,000, way over 2 million. That's a big difference, isn't it? Did I even change what interest rate I had? Nope, same exact investments. All it was more time. To go from $500,000 to 2 million. I know which one you'd rather have. And that means you got to have more time in investing. And that means you got to start early. Unless you want to work till you're 80, you got to start early. If you start early, you can have the 600 months. But if you wait till you're like 40 to start saving, you'll have some shrimpy number of months. You'll have to crank your payments up to huge payments. Huge. To have it be worth a couple million. And I've told you this before. I don't think when you're old that $1 million isn't going to be like, ooh, you're a millionaire, like big deal. It's not going to be that big of a deal. Because you'll have to have way more than that to be able to stop working. Because prices of everything are going to go up. I've also said the houses around here will average over $1 million for sure by the time you're my age. Having a house will be you'd have to have $1 million to buy the house, which you'll borrow, because most people will borrow to buy the house. But the price of everything goes up. But also incomes will go up. You'll probably make way more than me. By the time you're my age, you'll be like, Mr. Server, back in that day, he only made, well, again, a starting teacher, I'll just say that. Starting teacher makes like 45. You might be making $500,000 when you're my age, because everything goes up. Yes?
I use the bathroom now.
Yeah, hold on one second. And I am going to wrap it up here with just one last thought, and that is, you want to get the hub pass ready? Let me see it. I want to talk about the summary and reflection part. So on the summary and reflection, turn to part F. This is really important. You don't want to answer all those questions. If you read it, what it says is, include things such as, just to clarify, you don't have to answer part A and B and C. You just take from there the things that are most interesting to you and write about those. So what I would do is have like 5 paragraphs. The first paragraph, it says, that's the thing like, who did you interview and why? Okay, so start with that. This is on part F, number 1. So just talk about the interview. What was interesting about it? You don't have to tell me the whole interview. We've already got a section for that. You're just kind of saying what was interesting to you about the interview. Number 2, did the amount of interest surprise you? Like, is that interesting? I'm more interested in, I would definitely take out a loan to buy the car because I don't want to have to save up for it. It would take forever. So that would be a logical thing to write about. You don't have to write about all 3 parts. My point is just write about the parts that move you. And you read it, you're like, oh, I could talk about that. All right, so you don't have to answer all the parts. You do have to answer 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but you don't have to answer A, B, and C. You can just write about 1 or 2 of them. Okay? And that, if I were you, is an essay that I would type into a notability doc. How many of you have actually already started that? Or made slides? Okay, good. Awesome. That's way better than last time. For the rest of you that haven't started that, start. You could start it right now. You don't have to be done with the whole project first. Start answering the first couple questions. It's like, who did you interview? Now, I know if you haven't interviewed anybody, you might feel like, well, I can't do that. That's going to be the first paragraph. You can just skip the first paragraph until you have interviewed somebody. Just start writing about the second part. The second part is the car loan thing. What was interesting about that? Like was it surprising on how much the payment was? Or how much the interest was? All right. So from here, I want to give you a bunch of time. I tried to answer one of the most common questions. I tried to show you where the mistake in the packet was, which I will remind you if you forgot it, was part C. Part C, number 4, the present value. That's not supposed to be negative. That's a screw up in the packet. But if you made it negative, I won't mark it wrong. All right, now you know a lot more than you used to know, and I really hope that you will walk up and ask me questions about the project. I want to help you, and I got to stop here to be able to give us enough time to do that. Question?
Personal.
Okay, good. Then that's all I got for the video for today.